Omar al-Bashir, the former president of Sudan, has been sentenced to 2 years in detention after being found guilty of corruption, receiving illegal gifts and possessing foreign currency. Bashir has been in prison in Khartoum since being forced from power in April when security forces withdrew their support for his repressive regime after months of protests. During the corruption trial, it was revealed that Bashir told investigators he had received $90 million in cash from Saudi Arabia for personal use. The judge said the 75-year-old was being sent to the reform facility rather than a prison because of his age. The sentence was immediately criticized as too lenient by pro-democracy campaigners who said they would be organizing protests on Sunday. Bashir is also wanted by the International Criminal Court, which issued arrest warrants against him in 2009 and 2010 on charges of genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity in Sudan's Darfur region. The United Nations estimates 200,000 to 400,000 people dying in the conflict and a further 2.7 million were displaced. Militia formed and directed by Bashir are blamed for the worst atrocities. The Sudanese authorities have refused to hand over Bashir to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. His lawyers are planning an appeal. Dr. Jok Madut Jok, a Sudanese native, joins us from Syracuse, New York State in the USA to tell us more about how the verdict is received. He also updates on mounting calls for the US to lift the punishing sanctions on Sudan. Dr. Jok, good evening and thank you for joining us on The Globe.
Good evening to you, ma'am. Good to be back.
Now, Dr. Jok, how is this sentence perceived by ordinary Sudanese?
Well, the Sudanese people are cautiously jubilant that at least one of the easier sentences was handed down to Mr. al-Bashir. But they were not naive to think that some of the major charges against al-Bashir would be easy to find him guilty on, and that is a fight that will continue with all the other charges that are pending trial. One of which is as you said in your preview, the charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide with reference to Darfur, and people are awaiting what will be done. So there was some degree of appreciation of what has just happened. But at the same time, al-Bashir was a man who ruled the country for 30 years. So it is expected that he would have supporters who will not be happy with the sentence that was handed to him today.
But 2 years.
So there were protests in court.
Now, Dr. Jok, just 2 years, is it not perhaps a sign he should be tried by a global court, like the ICC, for example?
Well, the survivors and victims' families from Darfur, from southern Kordofan, and from Blue Nile are saying that he should indeed be tried in the ICC and not in Sudan, because any trial in Sudan will probably not go far enough to grant them justice that they think they deserve. And so there is some demand continuously that these trials on these cases of genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes should be tried by a foreign court. But at the same time, I think there are lots of Sudanese people who think that actually sending him to The Hague might be a bit too lenient, because they know that the process in The Hague can be quite slow and can be re-traumatizing. So there are people who say that actually the current government, which has already now demonstrated its capacity to try al-Bashir, should be the one to continue with these other cases.
Now, what about an appetite in the military to pursue more charges? And you also have those who propped him up. Are they going to be pursued in any manner in legal terms?
Indeed. I mean, al-Bashir is not the only one who was accused of this crime. There are many people there, including the former governor in Darfur, Ahmed Haroun, and many others, including some of the people who are in the current Sovereign Council. The difficulty, of course, is how is it going to be possible to charge people who are in office currently? But the hope is that all the other people who are with al-Bashir in the conduct of the genocide and war crimes in Darfur should also stand trial.
Now, let's talk about the ongoing sanctions talks. Al-Qasim Wayne, a former African Union and UN official with the responsibilities for peace and security, has joined the chorus calling for U.S. sanctions to be lifted against Sudan. And we've seen Prime Minister Hamdok spending literally a whole week in the U.S. Meeting with senior delegates, with regards to sanctions being lifted against Sudan. Do you think that this is likely to happen as the chorus continues to come through from different spheres of the continent, for instance?
No, I think the demands will increase. The demand for lifting of sanctions on Sudan, especially sanctions related to state sponsorship of terrorism. As many people think that the revolution that has just happened in Sudan is one that needs to be rewarded because it has brought down the longest-serving dictator of that country, and that was no small feat. And so the demands, as Dr. Hamdok did in Washington in his rounds of meetings, is weighing down the Sudan and making it difficult for the new government to deliver on some of the basic expectations, such as improvement in the economy. And that would not be possible if Sudan is still being weighed down by these sanctions that continuously discourage foreign investments. The image of the country is still tainted by them. So there is definitely going to be increasing requests and demands, if not protests, to be brought to Western governments, particularly UK and US, to lift some of these sanctions so that Sudan can breathe.
Is it not time for the US to basically flip a new page and help Sudan out of its current economic crisis?
Well, there is still quite a bit of suspicion that the members of al-Bashir's ruling clique have not entirely relinquished the grip of power, and that they may continue to influence what is going on in the new government, and therefore this calls for a period to test the ability of Hamdok's government and the Sovereign Council to actually rein in on some of these former military leaders who are still somehow connected to the ruling Sovereign Council, where the military generals are involved. So I think there is that still cautious optimism going on in Washington, that while the revolution has definitely brought a great deal of freedom to the Sudanese people, we are still unsure the degree to which the new government can really deliver on the promises of open society.
Now, just 2 years in a rehabilitation center, and the reasoning behind that is Bashir's age. What message does this send to the US and its allies with regards to the lifting of sanctions and just looking at how the judiciary has handled this particular, corruption case with regards to what former President Omar al-Bashir has done or is said to have done in the country with regards to corruption and other cases that might be brought forward? Will this impact on decisions regarding sanctions?
It definitely would impact that decision, because this is the test case for the new government to show that crimes committed by al-Bashir will be pursued before we can open up any talks of lifting the sanctions. Some degree of lifting of sanctions, of ordinary economic sanctions, have been done. But the state sponsor of terrorism is still a big issue, especially if the al-Bashir government is not going to be tried for such crimes as the killing of 100 people on June 3rd during the protest, during the sit-in. That is a case that has been brought against him, and we don't know how easy it will be, because the people who actually participated in the killing at that time are also part of the Sovereign Council. So the US and UK are going to be watching how the new government pushes the envelope of justice to bring accountability to these issues of killing. On June 3rd, the 2009 indictment on war crimes and crimes against humanity, and 2010 indictment of al-Bashir on crimes of genocide. How the government is going to be pursuing this to show muscle and to say indeed that al-Bashir doesn't have to go to The Hague, but we have a judicial system that can handle these cases and handle them in a just way that the Sudanese people can be satisfied by.
His age seems to be playing a very big, a contentious issue, or is being used as, an excuse or a way to get away from being given big sentences. What do you think this is going to do going forward? Do you think that that case is going to go forward with regards to how they can perceive him to be old and frail? Are we going to see big decisions and crucial decisions being taken?
Very likely decisions of that kind will be taken, but I don't think he's going to be allowed to walk freely just on account of his age. He's still strong. He's 75, yes, an elderly person, but he has spent 30 years causing misery for millions. 300,000 people died in Khartoum. 3 million displaced, and that is not a small indictment. Those are major charges, and in fact, it is also a question of letting the law take its course, such that if he is sentenced to 10 years, 15 years, then he can serve however many years he can serve, and then be pardoned later on for the rest of them. But the justice course has to take place to the maximum sentence possible for the crimes levied against him.
Dr. Jok, thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Globe.